welcome to Global News and Zuma Nigeria. We begin with Alabama prohibits college university diversity programs. India devises democracy index post-global downgrade. United Nations accuses Moscow of Ukraine abuses. Rohingya boat sinks near Indonesia, 50 feared dead. And study warns birth crisis to shrink every country by 2100. Alabama Governor Kay Ivey has signed a bill barring diversity, equity, and inclusion (DIE) programs in publicly funded colleges, making the southern state one of the newest Republican-led states to enforce broad steps against what they claim is a leftward tilt in U.S. education. The bill, known as SB 129, bans institutions from maintaining DEI offices or teaching what the bill calls divisive concepts about race and identity, including deliberations of whether slavery and racism are aligned with the founding principles of the United States. It authorizes state agencies to discipline or terminate employees or contractors who violate the law. It also needs them to designate toilets as only for men or women, a step against transgender rights advocates push for gender-neutral toilets. Ivey said in a statement, and I quote, "My administration has and will continue to value Alabama's rich diversity. However, I refuse to permit a few bad actors go under the acronym of DEI, using taxpayer funds to push their liberal political movement." The law is due to take effect in October. Republicans have rallied around opposition to DEI initiatives in United States education, claiming that diversity-focused curricula and hiring practices are part of an alleged liberal agenda to sow division and in some cases to discriminate against white people. Supporters of such initiatives say the intention is to promote equality for underrepresented groups. The American Civil Liberties Union of Alabama said in a statement opposing the legislation, "This is not only a form of classroom censorship, it's an anti-truth bill which curtails an education on systemic inequities, racial violence, and the historic efforts to gain civil rights and civil liberties for marginalized communities throughout our nation's history." Texas led the charge against DEI with legislation that forced institutions to close their diversity offices last year. Utah's governor signed similar legislation earlier this year, and many other states have introduced anti-DEI bills during their present legislative sessions. Last month, Rhonda Woodfin, the mayor of Birmingham in Alabama, expressed his support for black athletes exploring opportunities at universities beyond the state should the bill be enacted into law. "Although I'm the biggest Bama fan, I have no problem organizing black parents and athletes to attend other institutions outside of the state where diversity and inclusion are prioritized," he added, referring to the University of Alabama. On India's election 2024, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government has approached a key Indian think tank to develop a homegrown democracy ratings index that could help it counter recent downgrades in rankings issued by international groups that New Delhi fears could affect the country's credit rating. The Observer Research Foundation (ORF), which works closely with the Indian government on multiple initiatives, is preparing the ratings framework, according to two people closely involved in the discussions on the project. The index is expected to hew more closely to New Delhi's narrative than Western-based rankings that Modi's team has criticized. A top government official who spoke on condition of anonymity said a review meeting was held by Niti Aayog in January, and it was decided that ORF will be releasing democracy rankings in a few weeks. The new ranking system could be released soon, the official said. How soon, though, it is unclear, including whether the index might be disclosed before India's upcoming national elections announced last Saturday. India will vote in 7 phases beginning from April 19th, with votes counted on June 4th. Modi is a strong favorite to return to power for a third term. A second source familiar with the development said the democracy index being prepared by ORF went through a peer review process and expert analysis on the methodology a few weeks ago. It is likely to be released soon. ORF, which co-hosts the Raisina Dialogue, India's equivalent of the Munich Security Conference and the Shangri-La Dialogue, other major geopolitics and geoeconomics conclaves with the country's Ministry of External Affairs, said the Raisina Dialogue was held this year between February 21st and February 23rd. The Niti Aayog, the government's own public policy think tank that has been shepherding internal discussions within the Modi government on global rankings, said it was not preparing the index but did not confirm nor deny whether it was involved in helping an external think tank prepare one. Niti is not developing any democracy index, a spokesperson for the body said. According to reports, the government of India monitors select global indices by various global entities to drive reforms and growth in the country. Yet emails and the minute minutes of meetings held between government agencies over the past 3 years pointed to a growing urgency within the Modi administration on challenging setbacks to India's democracy credentials, including through a report prepared by India. On Russia-Ukraine crisis, according to the United Nations, Russia has tortured and arbitrarily detained people in the parts of eastern Ukraine it occupies, creating a climate of fear and suppressing Ukrainian identity. The United Nations Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine was denied entry to Russian-occupied Ukraine and based its reports on remote and in-person interviews with over 2,300 witnesses and victims. Since launching its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, Moscow has seized large tracts of southern and eastern Ukraine and currently occupies just over 17% of the country. Russian President Vladimir Putin in September 2022 announced the annexation of the regions of Kherson, Zaporizhia, Luhansk and Donetsk in a move rejected by Kyiv and most of the international community. On Wednesday, the report, which was released, finished with many people living under occupation have endured intimidation and repression, facing a constant threat of violence, detention and punishment. The United Nations investigators said they had verified the executions of 26 civilians, including 2 children on the spot, for instance, during house searches, as well as the killings of a further 30 civilians during detention. Most executions were committed between March and May 2022. It said no one had been held accountable for the abuses and noted Russia was actively trying to suppress Ukrainian identity as it imposed its language, citizenship laws, court system, and education curricula on the occupied areas. It added that the school curriculum had also been changed to one that sought to justify Moscow's invasion, and access to Ukrainian media and phone networks was blocked. United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk was quoted as saying, "The actions of the Russian Federation have ruptured the social fabric of communities and left individuals isolated, with profound and long-lasting consequences for Ukrainian society as a whole." Ukraine has accused Moscow of widespread war crimes in its occupied regions, while the International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant for Putin and Russia's Children's Commissioner over the forced deportation of Ukrainian children to Russia. The Kremlin denies committing atrocities against civilians. Now, after a wooden boat with an approximated 150 people on board capsized off the coast of Indonesia's Aceh province, lots of Rohingya refugees are feared to have drowned. The boat is thought to have run into trouble some 19 kilometers, 12 miles from the beach of Kuala Bobon on the west coast of Aceh after a rough seas on Wednesday morning. 6 people, 4 women and 2 men, were rescued from the boat by Acehhanis fishermen and taken to a shelter where they were able to speak to Faisal Rahman, a representative from the United Nations Refugee Agency, UNHCR. Rahman said the survivors' testimony suggested about 50 people had drowned. It is thought that most of those presumed to have died were women and children who were unable to swim and carried out to sea by the current. Amateur footage shot by local fishermen at the scene, which has been widely shared on Indonesian social media, showed survivors standing on the upturned hull. They all appeared to be male. Emaciated and dressed in shorts, they waved at the fishermen and begged to be rescued. Amiruddin, a fishing community leader in the Asibarat district where Kuala Bobon is located, said a search and rescue boat from Indonesia's National Search and Rescue Agency had been dispatched on Wednesday. It is unclear why the boat sank, although wooden boats carrying refugees from the refugee camp in Bangladesh are often in poor condition and overcrowded with only basic facilities on board. In August 2023, 17 Rohingya refugees died when their boat sank in the Bay of Bengal. UNHCR's Rahman said the search for the Rohingya boat was still ongoing. Fertility rates in closely every country will be too low to sustain their populations by the end of this century, a major study has cautioned. The study published in The Lancet showed on Monday that by 2100 populations in 198 of 204 countries will be decreasing, with most births taking place in poor countries. Sub-Saharan Africa is anticipated to account for 1 in every 2 children born in 2100, with only Somalia, Tonga, Niger, Chad, Samau, and Tajikistan able to sustain their populations, according to the study carried out by the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, AHME, at the University of Washington. Natalia V. Bhattacharjee, co-lead author and lead research scientist at the IHME, said the implications are immense. These future trends in fertility rates and live births will completely reconfigure the global economy and the international balance of power and will necessitate reorganizing societies. Global recognition of the challenges around migration and global aid networks are going to be all the more critical when there is fierce competition for migrants to sustain economic growth and as sub-Saharan Africa's baby boom continues pace. The demographic shift will lead to a baby boom and baby bust divide, the study's authors said, where wealthier countries struggle to maintain economic growth and poorer countries grapple with the challenge of how to support their growing populations. Austin East Komasher, the co-lead author and acting assistant professor at IHME, said a large challenge for countries in sub-Saharan Africa with the highest fertility is to manage risks associated with burgeoning population growth or risk potential humanitarian catastrophe. The huge shift in numbers of births underscores the need to prioritize this region in efforts to lessen the effects of climate change, improve healthcare infrastructure, and continue to reduce child mortality rates alongside actions to eliminate extreme poverty and ensure that women's reproductive rights, family planning, and education for girls are top priorities for every government. The study based its finding on surveys, census data, and other sources of information collected between 1950 and 2021 as part of the Global Burden of Diseases, Injuries, and Risk Factor Study, a decades-long collaboration involving over 8,000 scientists from over 150 countries. On more stories, Vietnam president resigns, stability questioned. The government said on Wednesday the Vietnamese Communist Party has accepted the resignation of President Vo Van Thuong in a sign of political chaos that caught hot foreign investors' confidence in the country. In a statement, the government said Thuong had violated party rules, adding that those shortcomings had negatively affected public opinion, affecting the reputation of the party, state, and himself. The Central Party Committee, a top decision-making body in Communist Party-ruled Vietnam, approved Thuong's resignation just about a year after his election. The president holds a largely ceremonial role, but is one of the top 4 political positions in the Southeast Asian nation. On Wednesday, calls to the presidential office went unanswered. The committee's meeting preceded an extraordinary session of the Vietnam's rubber-stamping parliament scheduled on Thursday, when deputies are expected to confirm the party's decisions. The government statement did not give details on Thuong's shortcomings, but major leadership changes in the one-party state have recently been all linked to the wide-ranging Blazing Furnace anti-bribery campaign. It is intended at stamping out widespread corruption, but is also suspected by critics to be a tool for political fighting. foreign investors and diplomats have continually blamed the campaign for slowing down decisions in a country which is already dealing with cumbersome bureaucracy. Thuong, 53, quit days after Vietnamese police announced the arrest for alleged corruption a decade ago of a former head of central Vietnam's Quang Ngai province who served while Thuong was party chief there. He had also been a senior party official of economic hub Ho Chi Minh City, which has been rocked by a multi-billion-dollar long-running financial scam for which a large trial is presently underway. Thuong was widely regarded as being close to Agent's General Secretary Nguyen Phu Trong, Vietnam's most powerful figure and the main architect of the anti-graft campaign. When ex-President Nguyen Xuan Phuc quit last year after the party blamed him for violations and wrongdoing by officials under his control, it took 1 month and a half for lawmakers to appoint Thuong as his successor. The present political crunch may well be resolved with the swift election of a new president, but risks remain that repeated reshuffles of top leaders hurt business sentiment in a country that is highly dependent on foreign investment. In African scene, Senegal prepares for Sunday presidential poll. On Sunday, Senegal will head to the polls to vote in a tightly contested presidential race that has fired up political tensions and tested one of West Africa's most stable democracies. The presidential election will take place after much uncertainty following President Macky Sall's unsuccessful efforts to delay the February 25th vote until the end of the year, triggering violent protests. In the newest turn of events leading up to Sunday's vote, last week, top opposition leader Ousmane Sonko was released from prison, triggering jubilant celebrations on the streets of Dakar and renewed excitement about the contest. Sunday's election is set to be Senegal's fourth democratic transfer of power since it gained independence from France in 1960. The country is seen as a pillar of stability in a region that has seen lots of coups and attempted coups in recent years. Founder of Africa, John Aliontine, in Senegalese think tank, said, according to a report, that Sunday's poll had set an ugly record in the country's democratic history, with right groups accusing Sall's government of repressing the media, civil society, and the opposition. Closely 1,000 opposition members and activists have been detained across the country in the last 3 years. But in a recent interview, Sall denied that he's trying to hold on to power, Human Rights Watch said. There are 19 candidates in the race, the highest number in Senegal's history. These include an ex-prime minister, a close ally of Sonko, who was barred from running, and a former mayor of Dakar. A runoff between leading candidates is widely expected. Despite the violent upheavals in recent months, analysts say unemployment is the measure for a majority of young Senegalese. Around half of Senegal's population of 17 million are under 18, according to Afrobarometer, in an independent survey research group. About a third of Senegalese live in poverty. World Bank data shows thousands have fled towards the West in search of economic opportunity, undertaking risky and often deadly journeys. Analysts say Amadou Ba, a former prime minister, and Bassirou Diomaye Faye, who is backed by Sonko, are likely to emerge among the front runners. Faye was also freed from prison last week in time to spend the final days of the run-up to Sunday's vote on the campaign trail. In January, Sonko was disqualified from the ballot because of a previous conviction for defamation. Senegal's highest election authority said at the time his supporters maintain his legal dilemmas are part of a government attempt to derail his candidacy. The popular opposition leader has faced a slew of legal troubles that began when he was accused of rape in 2021. He was acquitted of the charge but was convicted of corrupting youth and sentenced to 2 years in prison last summer, which triggered deadly protests across Senegal. Now in part 2, I'll bring you more story just after this break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. Now, stories from Nigeria. With insecurity rising, Senate panel meets service chiefs on Delta violence. Ahmed Lawan, ex-president of the Senate, has called on the federal government to prioritize the issue of security, saying that same takes precedence over investment in any other sector. He spoke before the Senate Joint Committee on Defense. Army, Navy, and Air Force went into a closed-door session with the nation's service chiefs over last Thursday's killing of 16 officers and men of the 181 Amphibious Battalion at Ukoma in Ueli, South Local Government Area of Delta State. Lawan, who is the chairman, Senate Committee on Defense, described the killing of the 16 soldiers as barbaric. He appealed to Nigerians to support the armed forces by volunteering information that will lead to the capture and prosecution of those behind various forms of insecurity across the country. The meeting, which began at precisely 3:42 p.m. local time, had in attendance the Chief of Defense Staff CDS, General Christopher Gwabin Musa, Chief of Army Staff COAS, Lieutenant General Tarit Lagbaja, Chief of Air Staff CAS, Air Marshal Hassan Abubakar, and Chief of Naval Staff CNS, Vice Admiral Emmanuel Ogalla. Remember that during plenary on Tuesday, the Senate mandated the Joint Committee to probe the incident. The upper chamber also urged the federal government to make sure those responsible for this heinous crime are identified, apprehended, and brought to book. The Joint Committee is chaired by Senator Ahmed Lawan, who is also chairman of the Senate Committee on Defense. Moments before the beginning of the meeting with the service chiefs, members of the Joint Committee observed a minute silence in honor of the 16 military personnel killed in Okoma community last Thursday. Senator Lawan, speaking on the incident in a speech delivered at the investigative hearing by the Joint Committee, recalled that the troops of 181 amphibious battalions on Thursday, 14 March 2024, went on a peace mission to Okoma community in Delta State. An incident occurred resulting in the loss of a commanding officer, 2 majors, a captain, and 12 soldiers during the peace mission. And finally, on the news on economy, Naira hits 1,400 to $1 as speculators sell forex. On Wednesday, the Naira recovered against the United States dollar at the official and parallel markets, with the local currency recording a major gain against the greenback at the black market. This came as the Central Bank of Nigeria announced the final settlement of all valid foreign exchange backlogs, fulfilling a significant promise of the Apex Bank Governor Olayemi Cardoso to process an inherited backlog of $7 billion in claims. On Wednesday, Mrs. Hakama Sidi Ali, the acting CBN Director, Corporate Commissions, who revealed this in Abuja, recalled the central bank had recently cleared $1.5 billion from the backlogs. On Wednesday, the Naira closed trading at 1,410 Naira to the dollar at the parallel market and 1,492 Naira at the official Nigerian Autonomous Foreign Exchange Market, according to data compiled from the FMDQ Securities Exchange. The gain recorded by the Naira at the official market represents an appreciation of 68 Naira or 4.5% from the 1,560 Naira per $1 recorded on Tuesday at NAFEM, and a gain of 13.5% on 119 Naira at the parallel market. According to report, the exchange rate has been gaining lately as speculators begin to jump their dollar stocks following warning demand by prospective buyers amid CBN clampdowns. A string of circulars by the Central Bank of Nigeria in recent weeks and months have helped to plug leakage and blocked loopholes previously exploited by currency speculators and racketeers. Also, the recent clampdowns on the activities of illegal BDC operators in Lagos, Abuja, and Kano by the operatives of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission (EFCC) also have aided to decrease the volatility of the Naira. Meanwhile, the intraday high closed at 1,620 Naira per dollar for the spot on Tuesday, while the intraday low closed at 1,350 Naira to $1 on the same day. The daily foreign exchange market turnover increased to $268.29 million from $195.13 million recorded on Tuesday. On Tuesday, reports said forex turnover at the official foreign exchange market increased to $11.43 billion within 2 months of trading following fresh reforms by the Central Bank of Nigeria (CBN). An analysis of reports and data of daily forex transactions recorded on the website of FMDQ Securities, a platform that publishes official foreign exchange trading in the country, showed that a figure increased by 185.75% or 7.43 billion US dollars between January and March 15, 2024. The improved liquidity at NAFEM followed a directive by the CBN on February 1st, 2024, asking banks to sell their excess dollar stock to improve liquidity in the FX market within 24 hours. The naira has continued to appreciate against the dollar following some foreign exchange measures put in place by the Central Bank of Nigeria (CBN). To refresh our memories, Alabama prohibits college-university diversity programs. India devises Democracy Index post-global downgrade. United Nations accuses Moscow of Ukraine abuses. Rohingya boat sinks near Indonesia, 50 feared dead, and study warns birth crisis to shrink every country by 2100. And that's all on the news. Thanks for watching.